Hey there, Marcus Hutzel here, and in this video I'm going to go over how to properly gain structure your USB audio interface with a standard XLR microphone for your computer for either just recording that audio or for use in Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or any other virtual meeting software. This is certainly the long version of a video to explain this process, and this process isn't difficult. You can actually gain structure on a microphone in a few seconds once you understand everything, but I feel it necessary to take the time to not just tell you what to do, but why you're doing it, and walk through each stage of that process. And I think taking a bit more time here will hopefully give you a better understanding of audio fundamentals so that you know what to do with any piece of equipment, rather than just telling you arbitrary settings that won't always get you good results. I think a lot of people are intimidated by this, but audio gain structure is very simple most of the time if you just remember the steadfast rule of always start at the beginning and work your way through the system to the end, and never work in reverse. That means starting with the mic itself, then adjusting the preamp on the interface, then adjusting any further settings on the computer or software, and lastly adjusting the main outputs or the headphone output on the interface. And remembering that typically, once the gain for the mic is set with the preamp, you can mostly leave it alone while always keeping an eye on it to make sure you don't clip. And remember that gain knobs are not volume controls. Gain knobs are not there for your ears or what you hear necessarily. The gain knob is there to boost your microphone's low-level mic signal up to an appropriate electrical level for our computers and our other audio equipment. So setting the gain too low means that our audio interfaces don't send enough signal from our mics into our computers or to anywhere else efficiently. But of course, gaining too high and clipping out the preamp is usually worse, and that's where headphones come in, so that we can verify by listening that our visual signal that we see on our meters corresponds to a signal that also sounds good. But the main takeaway that I can have for you is that you always want to set your gain as high as you can without ever clipping out the preamp or going into the red. Now, there are a few USB microphones out there that I've used that, due to their own internal digital routing, can cause you to have to listen to the end result as you adjust some of the things at the beginning, but ultimately they still require proper input gain of the mic, which comes at the beginning of the chain. But for purposes of this video, let's assume we're talking about using XLR microphones with a USB audio interface. And I'll use two mics in this example, a Shure SM58, a dynamic microphone, or this could be something like a Shure SM7B, a very popular mic, but one which I do not have. And I'll also use a Rode NTG5, which is a shotgun condenser microphone, but as you'll see, the gain structure method will be the same. And I'll be using a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 audio interface for this example, but gain structure is the same on almost every USB audio interface with XLR mic preamps, so you can substitute your USB audio interface here, like a Behringer UM2 or even the Focusrite Scarlett Solo, etc. And because I'm an Apple computer user and I only have an Apple MacBook Pro, that's all I can demonstrate in this example. I like Apple computers because they often do not need audio drivers to be able to use USB audio interfaces. If you're using Windows and your interface requires specialized drivers to get them to work, this video may not be for you, but once you get your interface working with your computer, you can certainly come back to this video to reference gain structure, because audio gain structure doesn't change with the operating system. Alright, so I'll use the Scarlett 2i2 and my Shure SM58, and while I hook these items up, you'll continue to hear me on one of my other mics, boomed up and overhead. I'll put on the screen which one you've been hearing most of the time now, and I'll switch over to the mic I'm demonstrating once I've gain structured it. So we'll first start by plugging in our audio interface to our computer with a proper USB cable, preferably the cable that came with the interface, and once we connect the 2i2, the USB light on the front of the 2i2 turns on and green to indicate that it's connected, has power, and is communicating with the computer. Next, on my Mac, I'll open up System Preferences and go to the sound settings, and I can verify here on both the Output tab and the Input tab that I see the Scarlett 2i2 USB device listed on both of these screens. There it is in the Output section, and we can click on the Input tab, and there it is on the Input section. So we know that our computer is communicating with the device. And I'll go ahead and select the Scarlett 2i2 on the Input tab so it's the active interface for my input into my computer. However, always remember that setting it as the default interface for the computer does not mean that any software application will automatically use it. You'll always need to go into Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or your audio recording software and make sure you select, in this case, the Scarlett 2i2 as the input for that software to ensure it takes the audio from the USB audio interface and not from some other input. And I'll also be using Adobe Audition to record the audio from these mics as we test them, so I'll have Adobe Audition open as well so you can see the same corresponding input level, but we'll come back to these screens in just a second. I don't have anything plugged into the 1/4" outputs on the rear of the Scarlett 2i2. I'm only concerned with getting signal into the computer for now. You can use those 1/4" outputs to send signal to speakers like the ones I have here on my desk, but be careful because if you do have speakers plugged into the main outputs, you'd want to make sure that large monitor knob is turned completely down so your live microphone doesn't get amplified out of those nearby speakers. Next, turn the gain knobs on both inputs all the way down, turn the monitor output knob all the way down, and turn the headphone knob all the way down. We want to start at nothing. I will use the headphone jack on the Scarlett to monitor and hear myself, so I'll go ahead and plug in my headphones to the headphone output there, but I'll keep the headphone volume knob turned all the way down because you don't need headphones just to get started, because we don't want our headphone volume to give us a false sense of our microphone gain. We're going to use our eyes to gain structure our mics. And I'm going to use this microphone arm to hold my microphone so I don't have to hold it. And obviously you'll need an XLR cable to plug into the output of the mic and then into the input of the Scarlett. And I'm going to use input 1 for now, so I will plug that in. And hang tight, you're not hearing me on this mic yet. We'll get to that. Real quick, on the front of the Scarlett 2i2, you've got 2 other buttons. We need to make sure those buttons are not lit up. There's the INST button right there, and you can see it's lit up. I want to make sure that's off. And there's also this air button. We want to make sure that's off. The instrument button assumes you're plugging in an instrument like a guitar into the input. We are not doing that, so we want to make sure that light is off. And older models of the Scarlett interfaces I don't think have this air button. This air button is a newer and specific feature of the 2i2, and it's more of an artistic effect that adds some equalization to the signal. We don't need that for now, so make sure it's off. So that's a fairly simple setup: USB audio interface with USB cable to the computer, verification that our computer is communicating with the interface in system preferences or Windows sound settings, XLR mic plugged into one of the inputs, ensure there are no special buttons like INST or air engaged on our preamp. This is a dynamic microphone, so I do not need the phantom power on, although it won't hurt dynamic mics if you do have the phantom power on. And we'll be using phantom power later, so I'll come back to that. Gain knobs, master output knob, and headphone knob turned all the way down, and our system preferences open as a visual reference of our level. And I'll also keep Adobe Audition open as a visual reference of our signal so we can see how the knobs on our interface correspond to signals into the computer. Now, it's important to note one thing about audio inputs on our computers. Some devices' input gain can be controlled by the computer, by the operating system itself, and some devices' input into the computer are only controllable on the device itself. For example, if I go into System Preferences here on my Mac and go to the Input tab and select the internal mic of the MacBook Pro, you now have an input slider which adjusts the input gain of the mic that's built into the laptop. So this is where you would set your gain of the built-in microphone on the MacBook Pro, and there's a visual meter underneath that indicates the current audio level coming from that mic as it relates to that input slider and the volume of my voice and the distance of my voice to that microphone. So if I record using that mic, and actually my MacBook is sitting over there underneath that camera, you can't see it, but if I record using that mic and I adjust the input slider, you can hear my voice going down because I'm reducing the gain on the microphone that's built into the laptop. So if I go up and down, you'll hear my voice go up and down. And the same goes for most USB microphones that do not have any controls on the microphone, like this Rode Video Mic Go 2. Once we plug it in, since there are no controls on the mic to control the gain itself, we look here in System Preferences and we can see we now have an input slider. So I would adjust the gain here on the input slider based on my distance to the mic. If I were further away, I could give it a little more gain. If I'm up close, then I would give it a little bit less gain. So mics like these will also have an input slider, and you'll always see a visual meter here in System Preferences. And the same generally goes for Windows sound settings. You'll have an input slider if that device allows the operating system to do that, and you'll have a visual meter showing you your input level. But if we go to the Input tab and select the Scarlett 2i2, you can see that we don't have that input slider, which means that the operating system can't adjust the input gain of the Scarlett 2i2. And that means the signal going into our computer from the 2i2 is exactly the signal from our gain knobs on the front of the 2i2. But you still have that visual input meter in system preferences, or again in Windows sound settings, so you can reference that visual meter and confirm your audio levels. And the same typically goes for most other USB audio interfaces with XLR mic preamps. Most of them do not have any operating system or input slider adjustments. Some do, but the 2i2 and even the Behringer UM2 do not have these input sliders. If we go here and select USB audio codec, which actually is the Behringer UM2, we can see we do not have any input slider there because the input from this device is also controlled only by the mic preamp gain here on the device. And this is where I think external USB audio interfaces are much easier for a lot of users because you really only have to worry about the knobs on the device sitting in front of you, and you don't have to always worry about checking all of the operating system settings. What you see on the USB audio interface is what gets sent into the computer. And when you're in a virtual meeting and maybe need to adjust some things, the interface is always sitting right there, sitting on your desk, and you can glance at it quickly and reach over and grab the knob and make fine adjustments. Whereas if you're using a USB mic, you'd have to try to find the window buried behind your Zoom call or other software to be able to adjust your input gain. And that, as we all know, can be problematic on those important virtual calls. All right, anyway, back to gain structure. All right, so we position our mic where we want it and start speaking at the volume where we think we're going to be for that recording or meeting. And as we do so, we start turning the gain knob up on our interface and watching the LED lights or other indicators on the interface itself. The Scarlett 2i2 has LED lights that go around the gain knobs to indicate the audio level that we set with the gain knob. Those LED lights are the most important thing you need to watch to set your gain level. As I speak into the mic and start to turn up the input gain, the LED lights start to light up, and this is where it's very simple to set your mic gain because the LED lights on the Scarlett 2i2 light up green when it sends a signal. They'll turn yellowish orange when the signal is getting fairly strong and nearing clipping, and the lights will turn red when you've given it too much gain, and red means you've then amplified the mic signal too much and you're now clipping out the preamp and your audio will be distorted. And I occasionally gain it up to where I do actually hit red and clip out the preamp for a second, check 2, then I just back it off to where my loudest speaking voice only occasionally makes the LEDs go that orange color, but the volume of my voice is always making the LEDs light up green. As I said in the beginning, you need to keep your preamp or gain knob as high as you can get it without ever hitting red. That's the job of our preamp in any situation, to gain up this microphone to the highest level without clipping, and that ensures our final audio will be nice and strong for our recording and at a comparable level to our other meeting attendees. And we can and should verify this incoming audio level over at our computers by looking at either system preferences on a Mac or Windows sound settings on our PC by looking at those input level meters that correspond to our USB audio interface. So I'll put both system preferences and Adobe Audition on screen so you can see how the gain knob is directly related to the input levels over at the computer. If I turn up my gain on the 2i2 and show some red on those LED clip indicators on the device, check, 1, 2, there's some red, we can see a corresponding level that is also clipping at the computer. Hey, 2, it's clipping in system preferences, and you can see very clearly that it's clipping hey 2 there in Adobe Audition. And you should always aim for obviously not clipping out the preamp and keeping the preamp as high as possible, and that should correlate to roughly 75 to 80% of maximum when you're at your normal speaking voice, which correlates to roughly negative 12 dBFS, which you can see my signal hitting about that negative 12 mark in Adobe Audition over there. And what I really like about USB audio interfaces with XLR inputs is that tactile physical knob that you can easily just reach for at any time, and the immediate visual verification from LEDs or clip lights on the device by just being able to quickly glance down and see if you're clipping. And that the levels you see on your interface correlate directly to the signal that enters your computer. You don't have to go try to find a software window that's, maybe behind your Zoom call that controls the microphone gain. You can always just adjust that with the turn of a knob. So after I've set my microphone gain for this mic, for this distance and level of my voice, and while watching the LED meters on the 2i2 as well as verifying in system preferences, I can then use my headphones to hear myself. And headphones are a great way to confirm that your gain settings are providing clean, undistorted audio from your mic. And because we want to and need to hear ourselves directly in real time in these headphones, your audio interface will need to have what's called a direct monitor feature, and almost every audio interface has this feature, and on the Scarlett 2i2 it's called just that, direct monitor, and it's right there on the front. The 2i2 has two modes, mono and stereo mode. I almost always use the mono mode, which is indicated by pressing the direct monitor button once and making the single circle light up. And what that does is it sends both inputs 1 and 2 to both the left and right side of the headphones. And if you put it in stereo mode, the 2-circle mode, that will send input 1 to only the left headphone of the headphone jack on the 2i2, and it will send input 2 to the right. That can be a little odd because you'd only be hearing yourself in one ear. So I almost always select just the mono mode there so that I can hear myself in both ears. And this is usually the mode you'll want to be in so you can hear yourself in both ears. Keep in mind that the direct monitor feature also sends the audio from your inputs out of the master outputs on the back, which is why I do not have speakers hooked up right now, because if I had this direct monitor feature engaged and speakers plugged in and I had any level going out of the main output, this microphone would then come out of the speakers and we get a feedback loop. So for purposes of this entire video, I've not had anything there, and which is why a good practice to always turn that down if you do have speakers hooked up and you want to engage the direct monitor feature. All right, so now with the direct monitor feature turned on, start by having the headphone knob turned all the way down so you don't hear anything when you plug in your headphones. Now you should have already set your input gain, so there's no need to change that gain knob as long as you aren't clipping. So now you can turn up your headphone knob to hear yourself, and there we go, I can hear myself. You do not want to adjust your gain to make yourself louder or quieter in your headphones, because as I've walked through, changing the gain knob changes your input into the computer and therefore the input into the recording or the virtual meeting. And we can see this very simply as I turn down the gain knob. You can see the level of my voice go down visually on the meters, and obviously I got quieter because this gain knob is directly affecting the input into the computer. So we'll just turn that back up and get back to where we need to be. If you need to hear more or less of yourself, use the headphone knob. If you're using a condenser mic, the process is the same. You'll just need to turn on phantom power on your interface. On the 2i2, the master phantom power button is right here on the front. And it's okay to turn it on as long as you're using only dynamic or condenser microphones. If you have a ribbon microphone for any reason, don't turn on phantom power while you've got a ribbon microphone plugged in. But most people out there are using standard dynamic or condenser mic, so you should be just fine. So I'll test my Rode NT-G5, a condenser mic, and I'm going to start by taking my headphones off, turning the headphone knob all the way down, turning the gain knob all the way down on input 1, and basically putting the 2i2 back to 0. So go ahead and unplug the mic and swing this mic out of the way. We're done with that one for now. Now my Rode NT-G5 is way up here. You can kind of see it in that camera right there. So I've got a cable running from that mic down here to my desk. It's right here, so we will now plug that in. I'll use input 2 for this example, just because we can. Again, make sure that both gain knobs are down on both inputs, monitor knob is down, headphone knob is down, and phantom power is on. So now with my shotgun condenser mic positioned where I want it, up here out of my frame, it's much further away, but that's okay. We'll follow the same process. And I'm not even wearing my headphones right now because I'm going to use my eyes to gain structure this NT-G5. So we'll start by turning up the gain, and we can see there on the 2i2 that we start to get signal, green signal around the LED meters. Check, 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 1, 2. And I'll just increase it a bit to where, hey, hey, 2, I'm hitting a little bit of orange. Hey, hey, 2, hit a little bit of red. So we'll back that off. Check, check, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I'm verifying over here in System Preferences, and in my case, Adobe Audition, that I've got a decent level. I want to be up in that 75% area in System Preferences, which again correlates to that roughly -12 dBFS over in Adobe Audition. And it looks like I'm there. We've got green LEDs on the Scarlett. Hey, hey, 2, we got a little bit of orange if I get really loud, but as you can see, it didn't clip when I did that. I didn't clip out the preamp, therefore it didn't clip out the computer. And I'll put my headphones back on. We've got direct monitor engaged when my headphones are down. I'll start to turn that up, and there we go. I can now hear myself through my Rode NT-G5 out of these headphones, and everything is just peachy keen. Your gain settings will be different for every mic and for the position of that mic, and of course the sound that it's capturing, like your voice. But just remember to use the gain as it was designed to get your microphone level up. So position your mic, speak, increase your mic gain based on your voice, get your input level nice and strong, Make sure you never hit red on that clip indicator on your audio interface. Verify that level in System Preferences or Windows Sound Settings that you're at roughly that 75% of maximum, and you can basically not have to touch the gain knob after that as long as you aren't clipping. Then use your other knobs like the headphone volume knob to set the level of the audio going to your ears. And that's pretty much it for input gain. The process really doesn't take very long. You can get up and running in 20 seconds if you need to, but I thought walking through this process would help you understand why we do certain things, how the equipment works, so that you can, again, take this and apply it to any equipment, whether it's the Scarlett 2i2, Behringer UM2, or any of your other XLR USB interfaces. Now, you'll also most likely need to hear your meeting audio or other audio coming from your computer in your headphones by using the headphone output on the Scarlett 2i2 or again on your other USB audio interface. And you can do this a couple of ways. The first method is to set your entire operating system to use the 2i2 as the main output, which will send all of the system sounds from your computer to the USB audio interface's headphone jack, and you can then hear those system sounds in the headphones. So you can hear Zoom, Microsoft Teams, but you'll also hear notification sounds, YouTube videos, or any other audio coming from your computer. And if we choose that method, then if we are using virtual meeting software, we'd go to our meeting software and set the speaker of the meeting software to use the output that the computer is using. So I'd set my laptop to use the 2i2 as the main audio output. Then here in Zoom, you'd set your speaker to same as system. And since the system, my computer, is using the 2i2 as its audio output, the audio from Zoom will go to the headphone output of the 2i2. And the second way is to set the output of only your meeting software to use the 2i2, while the computer audio notifications, video playback, and music playback all go to a different output other than the USB audio interface. So we'll set the output of the computer to use maybe the onboard speakers. So now any system sounds will come out of just the built-in speakers on the laptop. But we can then set the Zoom speaker to Scarlett 2i2 USB, and now only the meeting audio will come out of the headphone output on the 2i2. And as long as you have the direct monitor feature engaged, you'll hear yourself as well as the meeting audio. So to recap, start with mic placement, then adjust the gain knob and gain your mic up as high as possible without clipping. Verify that signal in your system preferences and other sound settings or software on the computer. Engage any direct monitor features on your interface to hear yourself using the interface's headphone jack. Then route your computer or meeting audio to your interface so it goes to the headphone jack, and use the headphone jack and headphone knob on the interface to hear yourself and any other computer audio. And don't forget to check the microphone input on both your meeting software or your recording software. Start at the beginning, your microphone, whether it be this one very close to me or that one a little further away, and follow and push the signal through the equipment to the end, and never turn down your gain to adjust for your volume in your headphones. Anyone can do it. You just need to understand the forward-thinking process of gain structure, and always use the visual meters and lights on your equipment and in your software to make sure you have enough signal electrically. Then verify with headphones to make sure that signal isn't clipped or distorted. I really hope this was helpful. It's a long video, but it's actually a very easy process that anyone can do. You can get very good at it. I can gain structure a mic in about 10 seconds. It's not hard, but I wanted to take the extra time in this video to explain not just what to do and which buttons to press, but why you're pressing them and why you're turning those knobs and what you should verify and look for when you do those things so that you can make sure your audio sounds great and is undistorted. So go out there and practice good gain structure, and I'll see you there. Later.